So, thank you everybody for joining the Toadstool and hosting both Cy Montgomery and Tianne Strombeck. This is an event for the Condor Comeback book. And just to give you a little bit of a background, researching films, articles, and 30 books, Cy Montgomery has hiked the Altai Mountains of Mongolia looking for snow leopards, tracked tree kangaroos in Papua New Guinea, and more. A National Book Award finalist, she has also been honored with a Cybert Medal, 2 Science Book and Film Prizes from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, 3 honorary degrees, and many other awards. She lives in Hancock, New Hampshire, and then visit her online at cymontgomery.com and on Twitter at Cy the Author. And then originally trained as an oil painter, Tianne Strombeck is now creates photographic portraits of nature to promote conservation and wildlife education. Her work has appeared in numerous books, including Cy Montgomery's The Soul of an Octopus. Tianne lives in Garland, Texas. Yeah.
Well, shall I start then? Yep, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my house and Tia's house. I'm just thrilled to be celebrating with you all today this book. It took years to create, and it was one of the funnest and most meaningful projects I've ever done. And the reason it means so much to me, well, I mean, for one, it's a way to share with anyone 10 years old or more the true story of what I think is one of the most creative and concentrated and controversial conservation success stories of all time. It's about the restoration of a species that was actually extinct in the wild. It's the story of this beautiful, astonishing, storied creature. It's North America's largest land bird, the California condor, with a wingspan 10 feet across. So it's no wonder that Native Americans revered the condor wherever it was found. It could soar to these great heights, and from there, the condor, of course, could see everything. And since the condor is actually a vulture, each one performs a miracle, and that is that it turns death into life. So Condor Comeback is an ongoing story. There's now hundreds of California condors flying free in 3 states in Mexico, but the species' survival is not assured. But my hope and Tia's hope was that by spreading the word, writing this book allows anyone who reads it to help with this comeback, restoring this beautiful animal to the skies. So how did the book begin? Oddly enough, with octopuses. In the spring of 2015, I was on the book tour speaking at Santa Barbara Zoo. And my best friend from junior high happens to live in Santa Barbara, so I planned to stay there for a few days. And the zoo director, Rich Block, introduced me and my friend to this absolute firecracker of a woman. Her name was Dr. Estelle Sandhouse, and she was the zoo's director of conservation science. A ton of energy is packed into her 5'1" frame, and she has a laugh like a waterfall and a love for condors that's like rocket fuel for her work. She likes to say that she used to study pandas and dump them for condors, who are, of course, giant vultures. So Estelle took me and my friend Amy to Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge, and there, at a glance, we could see a quarter of the Southern California population of wild condors. Now, why was that? We could see them at a glance because every California condor alive is so valuable and so vulnerable that each one of them is equipped with wing tags and telemetry, and each one is live trapped in a large outdoor pen every year for a health and telemetry check. And you see these things They are so huge and so magnificent. Their powers are astonishing. They can fly 55 miles an hour. They can soar to 15,000 feet. They can glide for miles without flapping even once. And they can live for 70 years, which is long enough to form an intricate social network of friends and lovers and family and enemies. And there's plenty of place intrigue to condor life. And they live long enough to grow wise. So when I look at one, I just can't help but see like a powerful ancient wizard or a respected old shaman. Now, I remembered at that time the story of how in 1982, there were fewer than 24 birds left on the planet. And I remembered when the last one was captured from the wild to breed in captivity. That was 1987. And then the species was extinct in the wild. But now, I learned from Estelle, thanks to a concerted effort involving state and national and private agencies and collaborations between field biologists and lab biologists and zoos and museums and school children and Native Americans. Now, there are more than 340 California condors flying free in the wild today. After an absence of half a century, this spring, 4 condors were seen in Sequoia National Park for the first time. They nest in Grand Canyon in Arizona. They fly over Fresno and Ventura and Santa Barbara in California. They nest in the canyons of Zion National Park in Utah, and they're in Baja, Mexico. But because the causes of their extinction are still with us, the battle is far from won. So I knew I had to write this book, and I knew immediately who should photograph it. Thanks to Meade Cadeau of the Harris Center, who many of you probably know, I'd met Tia back when I was working on the octopus book. She'd actually grown up in Hancock. And though she works in Texas, she still has a home here. And she took most of the photos for my book, Soul of an Octopus. But her specialty has always been birds. And I knew that Tia could capture the majesty and the dignity, and most of all, the individual personalities of these condors, like no one else. And I knew that she could also portray the extraordinary people and their work and the landscapes that this book was going to involve. I also knew that as soon as she met Estelle, Tia and I would just have such a blast researching this book. And we got to make 2 separate expeditions for this book to California. In autumn of 2018, we met Estelle at the Santa Barbara Zoo, and we traveled with her to Bitter Creek, where, among other things, we took part in the condors' capture and health and telemetry checks. And so for this, we got to actually hold wild condors. And I'm going to read to you briefly from the book to let you know what this is like. Twice I held different condors' scaly whitish feet for their blood draw. Estelle revealed that condor feet are really black. The reason they look white? They're covered with dried excrement, she told us. I tried not to look alarmed, and I made a mental note to remember to wash my hands before I ate. One of our keepers says it's like Purell, Estelle noted cheerfully. Their liquid poop actually helps condors keep their legs and feet cool and may even keep them clean. It's acidic and might even kill germs, Estelle explained. I was soon to enjoy the benefits of such purification myself. Because I was holding the feet, I was directly in the line of fire for 2 somewhat nervous birds and got pooped on twice. And you thought it was glamorous being an author. You wouldn't think that a stinky carcass would improve by passage through a vulture's digestive system, but it does. I was delighted to discover the condor poop and my quick dry pants smelled faintly to me of fast food hamburgers mixed with room freshener. I felt rather proud of this baptism, and I enjoyed holding the condor's entire body on my lap even more. My first was female 771, whose black head marked her as an adolescent. Birds in this group are often feisty, Estelle warned me. But as I held her, she remained calm and still, even during her blood draw. When the check was over, I started to rise to get her weight. I feared my grip on her body with my right hand was slipping. I unwisely let go of her beak. And that's when I got a blood draw of my own. Dave doused the bloody slit in my palm with a disinfectant betadine. Remember, she was just eating a carcass, Estelle said. I was the third person bitten that day. A good thing there were plenty of Band-Aids. Later, we captured adult male condor 480, who had earlier been outside the pen peering in. He rested on my lap as comfortably as a baby. With his keel between my legs, I could feel his heartbeat. And I think he could feel mine. As I held his right wing closed with my right arm and pressed his left wing against my chest, I could feel his heartbeat slow as he calmed. I held his head, neck, and beak exactly as Joseph had advised, and the condor never even struggled. He moved his head slightly so he could look into my face. His ruby eye showed obvious curiosity, but no fear at all. So after the health checks, we continued on, and Tia and I got to track birds with radio telemetry, and we visited a laboratory at UC Santa Cruz, where Dr. Myra Finkelstein is documenting the cause of the condor's decline, which was a mystery for decades. Because before the arrival of humans in America, fossil records show that condors were all over the place, from Western Canada, from Texas to New York to Florida. But by 1927, there were only about 100 condors left. Were hunters shooting them? They didn't know. Were they being poisoned as vermin by farmers? Were nature photographers harassing them? Were collectors stealing their eggs? Was it DDT? All of these things were put forth. But now it's known that the single most serious direct cause of the decline is lead from bullets. A bird or a person or any animal does not need to swallow a bullet to be poisoned. This is the thing. When a bullet is fired, it leaves a trail like a comet's tail of tiny lead particles. And a piece of lead, no bigger than a couple of grains of sand, is enough to kill a condor. So as well as a laboratory, we visited Los Angeles Zoo, where many of the birds now flying free were bred in captivity. You might have heard that the first birds released from the breeding program were raised by puppets. And this was actually a mixed success. The birds did breed, the babies did grow up, and they let them go, and they found out they were all a bunch of thugs. The first puppet-raised condors did things like land at a gas station where people are pumping gas and just walk up to people. One went into a campground and came out of somebody's tent holding a loaded gun by the trigger. And 4 flew into power lines and got electrocuted. It was a disaster. So they had to recapture those animals. They learned that condors, like people, can't be raised by puppets. They need parents. They need mentors. And that's how the youngsters are raised today. So Tia and I came back to California again the next spring. And again, we got to help with the health checks. And again, we tracked birds with telemetry. But this time we were able to do something new. And that was, we were able to see the chicks via nest cams. And we did a lot of other cool things for this book. We consulted with Native American elders to learn about condor medicine. We visited a school where children were helping to rid their schoolyard of micro trash. These are little bits of trash that the parents bring back to the nest, and give to their children, probably as toys, but they eat them and it gets stuck in their crop and they die. So what we amassed on our trips were the 89 pages of text and photos in Condor Comeback. And we hope it's a testament to the extraordinary effort of teams of people of many different ages and races and walks of life working together against all odds for decades to save a species. And Tia and I both feel that right now, at a time when everything seems so broken and angry and sick, it's a blessing to bring out a book about people working together to heal our sweet green world. So I'm going to turn it over to Tia now, who's going to tell us how she got some of these amazing photographs. And after that, we'll be happy to take your questions.
Thanks, Sai. And so when I photograph critters, whether they're animals or birds, there's always two questions that they ask first. Will you eat me, or are you food? And once we get past those two questions, and hopefully they're no, then the birds are curious and they're interested in my camera. It's making a funny noise and I'm there. And so, yeah, I get these wonderful portraits because I've got smart, intelligent birds that are just really curious. Now, anyone who is an avid reader of Sai knows that she goes to challenging places and does hazardous things. And of course, drags her photographer in tow. So we read about Sai going through bogs of leeches and on boats with man-eating tigers and climbing trees in the jungle and swimming in the Amazon. So I've had really super cushy projects with Sai. The first one we did was in the New England Aquarium. And now we get to work in California. It's basically a girls' trip and there's beaches and mountains. So I've gotten it really super easy. There were a couple hazards though. The first one being foxtails. And these are plants that stab you in the sock and work their way into the ankle. And as you can see, the condors also were not immune from them. And also, this is the mountain road that we were on, and there's oil drilling, and so you've got windy dirt roads with fast-moving trucks. We went up one night, and it was a little hazardous. And also, there's a constant vigil for fire. And actually, 2 weeks before we were there, they had the Thomas fire, which had it been different timing, we would not have been able to get to the places we got to and do the research. So timing-wise was just amazing. Now this is the classic vulture. And they're frequently portrayed as, you know, they're on Halloween cards, they're perched over, but it's on tombstones, and they're in the cartoons, they're scary little creatures. But, you know, I wanted to show the intelligence and the beauty in taking these photographs. And so, as Sai referenced, you know, this could be a shaman, or I also pictured it as some grande dame visiting Downton Abbey with her pearls and her boa and having tea. It's just, she seemed like a little 80-year-old woman. This one, it was just beautiful and elegant and wise. And this one was so distinguished with her ruby eyes and beautiful black feather boa. I fell in love with the boas. The birds are also social animals. So as a photographer, I wanted to make sure to catch all the different interactions that were happening with the birds. So these are two juveniles, and you can see they're touching beaks. On the back of the book, we have some fun ones that are fighting. So it's just the intrigue and the interaction of these beautiful, smart creatures. they're also peaceful giants. And as I said, they don't kill anything. Their claws are more like our fingernails than a raptor's claws. You know, we do have to watch out for the beaks because they're made to tear meat, but they're totally gentle. They don't kill. And if there were a raptor that was as big as a condor, that would be a truly scary thing. Here you can see the ear and nasal passage, but I really wanted to show that they also have these jowls, and they're air sacs that they can puff up to make themselves look bigger. And when I posted this on Facebook, one of my Facebook friends said, "Why would this big bird need to look bigger?" But, you know, obviously they're interacting with each other, and so they can also puff their bodies up to be just this enormous bird. The juveniles from age 1 to 3, as I said, have black faces, which become mottled. And when they become adults, you see these beautiful colors in the adults. So in this picture, you can see the orange and yellow and pink and purple, and they've got these bright red eyes. And like humans, when they're agitated or angry, their faces can blush and become bright red. So you get these wonderful rainbows of colors. Now, as Sai's writing her book, I also need to be a photojournalist and figure out how to capture the stories in photographs and what to put together. And so we went to a museum that actually had cataloged collections of the microtrash that was found in nests. And it was carefully marked. We knew what year, what the parents were. And then, as Sai mentioned, the LA Zoo is kind of the Condor hospital for that area. And so if a chick does swallow one of these pieces of microtrash, it can starve to death. And so Fish and Wildlife will actually intervene and have someone stay in the nest while they take the chick to the hospital and have surgery and bring it back. And so, you know, I reached out to LA Zoo once I had seen this microtrash to see if they had x-rays that would reflect the same thing. And so you can clearly identify bottle caps in the nest, bottle caps in the chick, you know, pieces of plastic. So I wanted to be able to tell that story in the photographs. Likewise, I mentioned that they don't have physical contact with the birds, but the birds are smart. So in the zoo, there's an area behind the pen where Ellie feeds them rabbits down a chute. And so, of course, the condors know that when Ellie goes into that room, the rabbit's coming down the chute. So here you see both Ellie and the condor looking up the chute for the rabbit. And I wanted to, since everything's scientific, we want to show what the scientists do. I wanted to make sure that I carefully captured all those features. So one of the things they do is pull a feather sample, and they don't want to cut the feather because that's a blood source. So they'll clip half of it and take it to the lab, and you can see here where it's sectioned off. And like human hair, they can tell at different times in this feather's existence the level of lead that this bird has been exposed to. And, you know, here's a close-up of them, again, cutting some of the feather off, not cutting the core of it, so that they can attach a transmitter. This also shows just how big those feathers are, you know, compared to an adult hand. So they're quite big birds. The other thing is, you know, girls start out being really good at science and math and robotics and that kind of thing, and then they get intimidated. And that's why we have STEM programs. So I wanted to take portraits of these young, brave, very competent women that are working with these condors. And so this is Ellie, who you saw with the rabbit earlier, also holding a condor to be weighed. And then we have Maggie, who has just managed to capture a condor in one of the nets, holding the beak very carefully in her right hand as she's very gently removing it from the net, because of course they take great pains not to hurt the condors in the process. And then we have Joseph, the condor whisperer. And once the bird is processed and weighed, they get released. Not everyone had the grace that Joseph had. Watching him, it was like a ballet. He was one with the bird. And you can see that as he moves through these positions, it mirrors the bird. And he even, as the bird spreads his wings, Joseph spreads his hands. And it was just grace and a ballet to watch. It was pretty amazing. And then finally, this was my cover model. And the grasses and things behind her just really reflected in her face. But, because she was looking up in the sky, she was so beautiful and just emanated hope. And so we proposed her for the cover, and fortunately Houghton Mifflin agreed. So that's my part of the discussion, and I want to thank the Toadstool for setting up this Zoom meeting. Certainly the local bookstores are key to our economy, so hopefully everyone will support them. And Elise for her patience while Cy and I worked with the Zoom.
I was terrible. I was terrible. And thank you, everyone, for being patient. We should tell you that T is now in Texas, but Willard Williams, who owns the Toadstool, had special book plates made up and sent to Tia so she could sign them. They're coming to our house here tomorrow, so I can sign them. And if you buy a book at the Toadstool, just call Willard and he will take your name and we can personalize the book and you'll have it signed by both Tia and me. So we would love to do that for you guys. Just call 924-3543 or contact the Toadstool, however you are used to contacting the Toadstool, and Willard will make it happen. So are there any questions that people have?
If anybody
We're
has any
happy to-
questions to start, there's the chat room and we can see who needs to have their question answered. So it looks like one person is asking from Marcy Hillman, are all the photos of California condors or are there different types of condors?
So the ones in the book are California condors. There's also a section though on vultures in the book. So there are different types of vultures in the book, and there is an Andean condor in South America. But in North America, it's a California condor.
Look at this one. I don't know if you can see it, but that's a king vulture, isn't it? So beautiful. I can't see what I'm showing you on the thing, but yes, there's some beautiful photos of other vultures. And there's an International Vulture Day,
Yes.
believe it or not, in September, which we hope will be a great media blitz for all the wonderful vultures out there that are turning death into life and keeping our world clean.
One person is asking, what are natural predators?
Of condors?
I'm assuming that that's what the question was.
Well, the youngsters can get picked off by just about anything. Young anybody. If you can get into their nests, any eagles or mountain lions, or I mean, a raccoon could go in if the parents are both out looking for food and eat the eggs or kill the chicks. But really, these guys as adults shouldn't have much to worry about. but they have an awful lot to worry about just because of us. I mean, power lines are still a problem, but most condors die not of old age, not of fighting with another condor, not of getting an infection, not of having, some animal attack it, but because they ate our poisonous lead, or their babies ate our poisonous trash.
Carry-ons is asking, what are their strongest senses?
Well, now let me see. Condors certainly can smell. A lot of birds, I actually just read The Bird Way by Jennifer Ackerman, and her subsequent book, which I actually reviewed for the American Scholar. And I was shocked to learn that a lot of birds actually have a good sense of smell. But these guys have a very, very good sense of smell. They also have incredible eyesight. They can see stuff from miles away. And they see in a different way than we do. They can see, for example, ultraviolet light. A lot of hawks can see actually the chemical trail that rodents leave in the grass from their urine. They can see that. And they can see details from a great distance that we can't. They can see colors that we don't have names for. So those two senses are extremely powerful in a condor.
And they have to have really good eyesight, because remember, they can fly as high as 15,000 feet. So they're up there looking for food and riding on the thermals.
Right. And that's another reason why lead is so horrible, because, if you're at 15,000 feet and you're coming in for a landing, if you're just a little bit mentally messed up from lead, which, as you know, causes brain damage, if you're just a little bit not right, it'll make the difference between life and death. And so did that condor die of lead poisoning? Well, yes, it did, because it made a bad decision because its brain was clouded with the poison.
Rachel Wolf would like to know, are there organizations you recommend we can support to contribute toward this comeback efforts?
Absolutely. God, thank you so much for asking that. In fact, the last pages of the book, how many pages are there? 1, 2, there's 2 full pages of organizations supporting them, ways to learn more, websites and webcams you can look at, wild condor cams, zoo cams, zoos and facilities you can support that medically treat and breed condors. And it gives all of the sites that you can go on your computer to support. So thank you so much for asking that. And that's one of the reasons that we wrote this book, to inspire people to want to do more and to put in their hands those resources that they would need to get in touch with these organizations. And also, I mean, depending on where you live or vacation, right now, because of COVID, that is not so much the case, but people can volunteer. And we hear from some of the people who volunteer to help observe the condors while they're nesting. So how cool a volunteer opportunity is that?
That's pretty cool. She also has a second part to her question. Also, can you please tell us a little about the Scientists in the Field series?
Oh, wow. Well, actually, Nick Bishop and I founded this series in 1999. Our book and Ken Mallory's book on sharks, our book on the snake scientist and Ken Mallory's book on sharks, hammer-headed sharks, I think it was, started this series of, there's certainly more than 30 books now in the series, and it's written so that anyone 10 years old and up can read it. It's probably in every school library that there is, and there's lesson plans for a lot of these books. And there is one for Condor Comeback too, although I got to put it up on my website. Thank you for reminding me. And in the back of the book, it lists some of the ones in Scientists in the Field. But again, I can't see what I'm holding up to you, but these are just a few of them. There's way more than this. I've written something like 10 of them. I wrote about octopuses and tapirs and Amazon adventure hyenas, cheetahs, kakapo. I had the world's rarest bird try to copulate with my head, trying to research that one. Great white shark scientists. I got to cage dive with great whites for that one, which was pretty awesome. And I got to work in a pit with 18,000 snakes for the first one, which my mother really didn't like. And then we did the tarantula scientists. But there's lots of others. There's ones about tracking trash. It's okay, big guy. Thurber doesn't like thinking about all the trash in the ocean here. There's ones about digging up bird dinosaurs in Madagascar. And the whole idea is to be half photos and half text to encourage reluctant readers to open the book up and want to learn more. So what we do is we take our reader with us on a real field expedition and experience everything that the scientists are experiencing. I went to Papua New Guinea to radio-collared tree kangaroos in the Huon Peninsula up at 10,000 feet. It's just the most cool and awesome thing. I love doing these books. And kids love them because kids love adventure. And a lot of kids have this idea about science that you're just walking around with a white coat in a lab. And that's cool science for sure. And lots of people like that. But that's not all there is to science. So there's a great deal of adventure too.
Angelica Hinojos is wondering, we were wondering, why do they have their eyes kind of closed?
Okay. In some of the pictures, Tia, you might want to answer that, but one of the thoughts that I would have is if the eyes look kind of closed, it may be that they're feeding. And when you can't eat with a knife and fork and you have to eat, with your face, they don't want to get carcass juice in their eyes. Their eyes are really, really, really important. And for that reason, they have a third eyelid called a nictitating membrane. But I'm wondering which of the pictures specifically she's talking about in the book, because many of them, the eyes are wide open. Tia, do you want to address that?
I don't know which ones she would be talking about. It may be because they weren't looking at the camera, or they're maybe squinting in the sun. I don't know. I can't. A typical condor, as I said, will typically have its eyes open, like the one you're looking at. Or if it needs to protect its eyes, it will pull the membrane over, which sometimes I'll show just for the sake of showing the membrane, but there aren't. I didn't add any to the book.
Carry-ons is asking, do they vocalize with one another? And what are their styles of communication?
Oh my gosh, yes, they're very noisy. Yeah, they make a lot of different noises. They hiss, for one thing, which is really amazing to hear. But I find that birds make a lot more strange noises than anyone would ever expect. Don't you find that, Tia, when you're observing birds?
Well, and we wanted to get a recording for the original video, and so someone thought it would be really cool to have that hawk sound, that when a hawk is hunting, and of course condors don't do that. It's mostly a series of grunts, as I was saying. It's, there isn't that screech that a hawk would make. But if you really want to hear it, they do have just Google it.
Oh, what? Maybe I can do that
condors
and play it, because I've got a computer right here. Let's see. California condor vocalization. Let me just see if something comes up. Uh,
Yeah, they had some samples.
oh boy. Oh, here we go. Wait, this is, all right. This is the Andean, but, oh no, it doesn't make music. Oh, for goodness sakes. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
You can. That gives you an idea.
Yeah, it's not what you think a bird would say.
Hmm.
Sounds like a volcano or something.
Um, Judith Palmer is asking, what do they eat?
Carcasses. Kind of like we do, except those of us who are vegetarian. Yeah, they do not kill anything. They eat carcasses. And somewhere in here, someone calculated for one vulture how many carcasses they eat. And it's not immediately at my fingertips, but they eat so many carcasses that you realize that if something happened to these guys and all the vultures disappeared, we'd all be walking up to our lips in carcasses.
That sounds pleasant.
Well, and there's an ad that plays these days that just upsets me when I see it because it implies that they kill turtles. And again, they don't kill anything. It's all found carcasses, which is why they're so susceptible to lead. I mean, any of the birds, including eagles, that are scavenging these carcasses will get lead poisoning.
I think it's 131 species have so far been cataloged that get lead poisoned from bullets.
Well, and the other thing to consider, there are lead alternatives, but hunters that insist on using lead, as Sai said, it's like this tail of a comet. And so if you bring that meat home and serve it to your kids, you're giving them lead as well.
That's a really good point.
Bakor is asking, what can humans do about the lead issue?
Well, that's such a, I love the fact that people want to step in and help. There's alternatives to lead. There's, for one thing, copper washed bullets that hunters say actually work better than regular lead bullets. And there's alternatives to lead sinkers for fishing tackle. There's just choose a different material that isn't as toxic. Lead is uniquely toxic because the body takes it up as if it's calcium. And we need calcium not just to build strong bones and teeth, we need calcium for our nervous systems to work. It's really important for our healthy nerves. And what lead does is the body takes it up preferentially to calcium. So you don't have this essential element. But that isn't the case for some of these other alternatives like copper. Your body doesn't behave the same way when it's in contact with copper. Now, copper is not great for everybody. Octopuses, even though their blood is copper-based instead of iron-based, copper will kill an octopus, but it won't do you any harm at all if you're a condor feeding on a carcass that was shot with copper washed bullets.
Sally Patrick is asking, what drew you to condors and what's next?
Well, what drew me, first it was meeting Estelle. She was just on fire. But when I saw the birds and I saw how huge and magnificent they were, and looking in their faces, how how individual, how wise they looked. And I love animals who kind of are underdogs. I mean, I've written about snakes and tarantulas. A lot of people are scared of snakes. A lot of people are afraid of tarantulas. I've written about hyenas, who are unfairly maligned. And I think vultures of all kinds are unfairly aligned. But as far as what's ahead next, as of today, Tia got word from an editor at Simon & Schuster, and she's going to be doing all the photographs for a book that I'm doing. It's actually lifted out of my book, Birdology, just on hummingbirds, which will showcase her gorgeous hummingbird photos, some of which she's taken in Ecuador. And also, I should probably plug this. What's next is, I just got this. Coming out in the end of September, picture book. And this is a picture book for young, very young readers, even people who can't read, based largely on my memoir, How to Be a Good Creature. So that's the next thing that's coming out from me.
And you're also working on turtles, I hear.
Yes, yes, indeed. You have heard so much about turtles. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Howard's about to move out. Yeah, I'm working with Matt Patterson, the artist in New Ipswich. He's a turtle artist. He's fabulous. He knows a ton about turtles. He's got 10 turtles at his house with his wife, Erin, his long-suffering wife, Erin. He just added 6 new turtles to his collection like a few weeks ago. And she was a saint. She went along to keep a lid on it, but somehow ended up coming home with 6 new turtles. Anyway, we're volunteering at a turtle rescue league in Southbridge, Mass. And we're also working with a nest protection agency. And this is a book that won't be out for several years, but I'm having a blast.
That's all the questions I see in the chat. There were
Well,
a couple
fabulous.
of comments that were like little feedbacks, like EJ said, beautiful comment on the cover photo, looking up with hope. And then Harv shared a little story about in the fall of 2019, I spent a week backpacking up on Paria Plateau by the Condor release site. Pretty amazing to look up and see half a dozen condors in the sky above us. They are very curious. We were climbing up a crack and the condors were swooping down to check out what these crazy humans were doing. Thanks for creating this book.
Wow. Thank you, Harv. Wow.
That's pretty much all there was in the chat. Just like
Okay,
little thank
great.
yous and whatnot.
Well, that's terrific. And anybody, again, if you want a signed, personalized book for you or anyone else, just call the Toadstool and they will relay it to us. And the Toadstool will ship your book out with a signed by both of us and personalized book plate. So thank you so much for supporting the Toadstool. Thank you, Toadstool, for supporting us. And this was really a blast to work with Tia again and talk to you all tonight.
Thank you guys for joining us too, and
Well,
choosing us
thank
to
you.
do this event with.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.